Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today I wanted to talk about a survey of career interest in the game that CIG put out, and basically what's on the roadmap that may interest these folks, as well as some other implications. So first off, I think it's worth noting that some of these are obviously going to kind of bleed into each other a little bit, not to mention that I think it's rare that people are really only wanting to do one thing in the game. Now, one of the most interesting things about this is that two of the top three interests that surrounds careers that people want to do are things that we don't really know much about, being exploration and then science and research as 1 and 3 on the list. Now, with exploration, there's a few things that we can assume that people want to do when they select it, such as trying to find new jump points, or trying to find new places of interest, or scoping out valuable data, such as locations of good mining spots, or locations of derelicts, or just going out and seeing the sites. Now, what's a little bit concerning there to me from a player perspective is that it's incredibly wanted by the community, but looking at the upcoming roadmap, there's very few things that are slated to come to fruition in that realm in the next 12 months that may have any impact on those actual tasks. Now, sure, you're going to get the Carrick and Microtech in 3.8, which is a Q4 of this year, but that's basically giving you an exploration vehicle and a new planet to go to. We already have exploration vehicles in the game, yet we don't have any real value to ships like the Freelancer Dur or the 315P, aside from having a bit of cargo ability and some better components for distance. So for the next year, the most desired gameplay by players isn't going to be in the game. Now, can you use ships like this and make your own fun? Sure, but the ships and games aren't really offering you anything else. I understand that development is going to really need to follow what Squadron 42 is demanding, so I expect lots of combat things to be present, but it feels like with the other systems being present to allow for jump points, and without advanced scanners finding other things, or even without the ability to store things like locations and waypoints to share with other people, we're kind of secluding a large number of players from what they want to do until there's further development in the game. Now, the other one I mentioned there was science and research, which is interesting because I have no doubt that the people who chose this option have specific things that they want to do, but I would say that summarizing what these tasks are would really cast a wide net as to what would be considered science and research. Now, are we talking about the ability to improve components through tuning and tweaking and tossing something in a super collider? Maybe. Are we talking about studying specific elements in the ore to find better ways to mine or make it more profitable? Possibly. Are we talking about unique anomalies that are in space and running scans to understand what they mean to the larger population? I don't know. But what I do know is that we don't really have anything defined on the role, nor anything on the roadmap or in the game to support that. Though I guess we do have the Reliant Sen present in the game for those who want to pretend, but that's about the most you can do right now. So 2 of the top 3 desired gameplay types are strangely vacant on the roadmap, which I kind of feel like isn't really helping many people get into the game today. Now, the second one on this list is trade and cargo, which is going to be the second place one overall, which is good because that's an area where we actually have the ability to do things in the game, and there are improvements on the roadmap that are scheduled. Now, I assume from the voters' perspective, this encapsulates commodity trading, hauling goods from one location to another, you earn a profit. And today, you can take out a mission, or you can land at a station or an outpost, you can buy, travel, sell elsewhere to make money. But there is more coming on the roadmap, which includes the introduction to the Hull C coming in Q4, as well as the Taurus in Q1 of 2020. Now, the Taurus is going to be nice to see, but the Hull is going to be pretty limited at first, unless they introduce something as a stopgap before the new stations that are coming in 3.9, which are designed to allow for cargo depots to really fill ships like the Hull series in space, considering they can't actually land on planetary surfaces while laden. That also comes into play with the fact that you introduce the Hull C, and you're not really able to fill it because it's going to be so expensive to do that. Now, maybe what we get is an ability to spawn cargo on a ship that kind of floats aside from Al-Azhar, but I kind of doubt that too, which does mean we're going to be a little bit limited in how we get to use this ship at first. Now, I know the Hull C was the design base for the Hull series, but I can't help but feel from just giving players a usable ship sooner than later, a landable ship like the Hull B would have been a better place to start. Now, the other aspect that we see coming is the black market's first iteration coming in 3.6, which isn't really full-on black market, but it's going to give authorities and selling locations the ability to tell if you're carrying stolen goods. Now, I think that falls more in the line of piracy than actually cargo, but they blend a little bit, so it is a factor to consider. So trading in cargo is one of the few areas that represents a large number of players where we see good progress both already done and being made in the upcoming development cycle, so I feel like cargo is in a pretty good spot. Now, in a similar space, though, is the 4th and 5th desired gameplay being bounty hunting and mercenary. which are somewhat similar in tasks today anyways. I think we would see players blending these two roles anyway, but in a core mechanic perspective, there's two different ways that they can happen. Bounty hunting is either going to continue to be kill on sight, or it's going to eventually blend into capturing alive prisoners and hauling them to a location, to a holding cell, which I assume is going to be more profitable. Mercenary work kind of blends into the approved assassination model that we see in bounty hunting today, but it should also include things like hunting down threats, escorting and protecting, or responding to calls. The mission system today does provide some of these, such as like assist beacons or transport beacons and missions to go kill people that have bounties on their heads, but it's pretty limited. Now, seeing more ability to do an escort role, taking someone from point A to point B safely and making sure their ship arrives, is going to be important. Or being able to work in a wing of fighters to call out and coordinate attacks, and just having quality of life improvements on the HUD in a combat perspective is important, and it is on the roadmap, but it's further down the line and it's not specific. There are some ships that are coming that's going to help with mercenary work, such as the Defender, the Harbinger, the Sentinel, and the Cutlass Blue. And from the bounty hunting, we have the Blue, along with player bounties and improved NPC bounty experience, both coming in 3.7. But there's still no mention of actually using holding cells for the more complicated transporting of criminals that you've apprehended and approached. So a ship like the Hawk essentially is still on that kill, as opposed to using the neat little seat in the back. There is a bit coming, plus with combat being one of the more defined roles today, primarily because Squadron 42 kind of demands it, not to mention it can be a little bit simpler to develop. It's in a decent place, but it's clearly very desired, and there's a lot missing from the roadmap that means we're going to be waiting longer for many people to be able to do exactly what they want. Now, most of the other careers are less combat focused, which is interesting because there's always a dependency to be able to fight or pretend to have protection in any, or be prepared to have protection in any non-combat role. But also that so many people are choosing non-combative roles in a game that's been developed so heavily in the combat direction to this point. The next gameplay is Salvage, which aside from having the Reclaimer in the game, we have no current gameplay to support it. There's a few things that are coming that'll help with that, though, with the first being hover mode, which I think for a ship like the Vulture, which is coming in 3.9, it may actually support conducting salvage work in a way. But more importantly, in 3.8, we should have a version 1 of Salvage coming to fruition, which will likely be kind of like mining started, which is very basic and just enough to get your appetite for it, but we're likely a long ways out from it actually being a sustainable in-game career. There are other implications, though, such as OCS improvements that should allow for debris being able to stick around for longer periods of time, so you could actually reclaim NPC or player ships that get destroyed. Now, it's going to be interesting with the Vulture coming on, how much that actually opens up salvage gameplay, because the price to enter on a Reclaimer is very high, with it being the top tier in that gameplay line, meaning that we're not going to have a ton of people that have that ship unless it ends up being a loner for people that have the Vulture as they get salvage in the game, which I hope it is. Search and Rescue was next on the list, and today there's a little bit you can do, but it's more in kind of a choose your own adventure or work with your organization to make these things happen, and not really having the ships to help you do it. For example, you can respond to beacons, but you can't really do anything to support people. Now, coming on the roadmap, though, is going to include the Cutlass Red in 3.7, as well as ship-to-ship docking and medical healing in 3.8. Those are great to see because they're going to open up some gameplay, but until there's really going to be specific beacons to help, or until you get scanners that can help find a floating person, which you can't do today, it's going to be a little bit limited. My guess is that we end up seeing a mission where you get a marker for where the person you need to save is, or they tie it into that ship-to-ship docking view and say that you know where they are, you know their location, and you know that they're on a ship, so you have to dock with the ship and then go get them. That's probably an early iteration until they figure out like a player rescue type of scanner that would be on board a Cutlass Red, but we'll just need to see how they're going to actually make that playable. Now, mining is next up on the list of wanted roles, and we do have this today with the Prospector and being able to mine on moons and planets in space, and it's actually in a pretty well-defined state right now, which is great considering it's more we can do to earn credits in the game today. But it's got pretty far developed, well beyond other roles that were significantly more desired from the public's perspective. Now, as far as development moving forward is concerned, There isn't really anything on the Star Citizen roadmap that's going to help with mining, although the Sidnus mining drone is at least scheduled on the Squadron 42 roadmap, so maybe that slides in at some point, but there's other things that we still need to see, like a mid-sized mining ship, which isn't even in concept, the Orion, which is going to take a long time to get out, the ability to use drones, the ability to replace prospector bags, loading them onto whole ships, sharing profits and when you go to sell it. There's a lot of gameplay there that's missing from mining. Now, I like that they got this one started, but I am a little concerned that they're going to kind of get some of these very initially scoped out, and then they really kind of get back to the back burner while they work on other careers. I don't really think that's a problem, because I feel like everything should start somewhere, but for those that pick a career, this may be a kind of a taste of what's coming. So if you want to do search and rescue, for example, you may get a very bland iteration first while they move on to something else. Strangely enough, information running was next, and while we do have the Herald, we literally have nothing on the roadmap about this. I think it'd be nice to open up the transport option here and say that you can run a mission using the Herald's external data pods and take them from one location to another, basically so the ship has something to do in a mode that should already be supported while we wait so you can see how collecting data or potentially leveraging some electronic warfare too. I think there's things they could do to actually let people do info running that wouldn't take a lot of development off the cycle. Now, one that I was surprised was as low on request as it was repairing, refueling, and rearming. Now, granted, that's a lot of gameplay there that covers a lot of bases, but that covers so much that I would have expected it to be a little bit higher. Either way, the only thing on the roadmap to help support any of this would be fuel scooping, which leaves out refining, providing another ship with fuel, fixing another ship using drones, beacons, and a lot more. This seems to be a really long way off for now, and maybe based on the complexity of it all being in a really large group, maybe they're keeping it all together, but we're not close there. So ships like the Vulture and the Crucible, which aren't even roadmapped at this point, the Vulcan and the Crucible, they're not on the roadmap, or ships like the Starfarer, which is in the game, but it's really limited to being used outside of its intended purposes for the time being. So there's a lot to be desired there. Now, as far as the final three careers to round out the list were passenger transport, piracy, and racing. Now, passenger transport, we do have beacons today for this to earn credits, and players are taking advantage of this. However, large-scale passenger trips in a ship not on the roadmap like the Genesis, or in ships that we do have like the 600i, is vacant, meaning that you can't just get a bunch of people and collect fees for doing it, almost acting like a shuttle. Now, you do get microtech in 3.8, so it's another location players are going to need to be ferrying around from, but we're not real close to a larger scale in how it fits into the economy overall. Racing, we have Arena Commander and Scramble races, but that's it, and with nothing else really coming right now. But I'm not expecting a whole lot there either, so as far as development goes, it's a little bit vague, and I think it's going to be more events that we see later that kind of lead to racing, or maybe player-created types of things taking place. And then there's piracy, which was much slower than I expected, which also may mean that people weren't being real honest. But either way, you can do some of that in the game today, but it's generally an extension of combat, such as destroying people and then stealing boxes from their ship. Now, we do have things like bounty improvements that we mentioned before that are coming that's going to complicate life for a pirate, as well as the black market, which could also mean that you have new destinations that are required to sell your ill-gotten gains. Ship-to-ship docking in 3.8 I think is going to be pretty huge for piracy because it brings on a new way to board a ship, but that also requires surprise and disablement, which EMP and disruption that we already have today is going to play a role, but it's going to be really hard to do. Does the timing need to be tweaked? Is there a lot of balance that needs to play there? So ship-to-ship docking may only be a voluntary thing for the time being unless some of these other gameplay mechanics would change and open that up. So with all of that in mind, how does this set up moving forward? Well, the most obvious one is that there's a lot of people that are going to be disappointed in what they get over the course of the next 12 months if what they voted on actually mirrors what their expectations are of this project. I think it also shows how committed CIG is to getting Squadron 42 out the door to prioritize the aspects that they are, which is fine because that's obviously a deliverable that they're trying to achieve and get out to the world. I'm wondering if this is an exercise that should have happened a long, long time ago to kind of help craft some of the direction to appease the most people first. At this point, I don't even think it's possible to reevaluate what they're going to do or prioritize, but maybe it is. I think that probably spells out some troubles, though, as these things tend to stack on top of each other. But we have seen the roadmap change direction several times, so it's possible. I think the more we can put the roadmap front and center, along with what's currently possible and available, may help to kind of clarify expectations a bit. But it is a bit concerning to see what the user expectation may be about what they're going to get with the most realistic time frame of when it's actually going to come to fruition. I think personally, if it were me, I'd probably try to focus a few different tasks towards things that are probably highly desired but not real present in the game or roadmap, and try and do things like get exploration up and running with a gameplay that includes data storage for points or locations that you can then sell to people. Obviously, getting another system up and running, maybe Pyro or something like that, would be great. But until scanning and mapping and data repositories are a thing, it only would provide so much value outside of showing the ability technically to create another system. So I think if you could give players a chance or a reason to wander around and kind of bolster up exploration, that would be huge because it's tackling the largest blocker that you have in place. Anyways, when you compare all that data, how do you feel about it? I'd love for you to kind of toss some comments in that comment section because I'm curious how these line up for you. Or if you have questions, get them in there too. Otherwise, appreciate you guys watching. Stay tuned for a lot more coming soon, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Take care.